Welcome to Justice in Two Languages.
Welcome back to Justice in Two Languages with attorney David Elias Idinopulos, founder of Elias Law in Albuquerque, New Mexico. David is a bilingual Spanish-speaking attorney dedicated to helping New Mexicans recover after serious accidents and stand up to insurance companies and corporations that take advantage of them. I'm Chelsea, and today we're talking about how bilingual lawyering builds trust from the first conversation to the final settlement. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with your story. How did a lawyer from Southern Ohio end up serving the South Valley community of Albuquerque and building a bilingual practice?
You know, it was a pretty circuitous route. I was a terrible student in high school. I had to take a couple semesters of Spanish. I learned virtually nothing because I was such a bad student in high school. But I went up the road a couple hours to the Ohio State University, got serious about education. And at Ohio State, they required me to take 4 semesters of a language. And I figured, obviously, look, I've already taken 2 semesters in high school. I may as well just take it in college. And so after 4 semesters of Spanish at Ohio State University, I realized, I'm kind of speaking this language. Maybe I'll take a few more classes, see where it goes. Took a few more classes, and then my advisor says, it's only 1 or 2 more classes to a minor. So I said, all right, I'll get the minor. So I get the minor, and then my advisor tells me, well, it's only 2 more classes to a major. So I get the major, and then my advisor tells me, it would be a shame for you to stop right now. Why don't you go to a foreign country and study the language there? So I went to Spain, studied the language there, came back and took graduate courses in Spanish, graduated, went to law school, and then for roughly about 10 years after I first became a lawyer, I would use my Spanish once or twice a year when I was lawyering in Southwest Michigan. I had an office across the street from the courthouse. The courthouse would occasionally call me and they would say, hey, we have someone here, but we can't get a translator. You speak Spanish. Would you do it? And my reaction was, yeah, man, it gives me an opportunity to practice my Spanish. It gives me an opportunity to serve the community in some way. Of course, I'll do it. And then after 10 years of practicing law in St. Joseph, Michigan, I moved to Albuquerque. Shortly thereafter, started my practice. And I tell people that I moved to Albuquerque on Monday and started speaking Spanish on Tuesday. And we have an entirely bilingual office here. I'm bilingual. Probably 90% of the people who work here are bilingual. You will hear as much Spanish spoken in the office between coworkers as you will hear English. And of course, because probably 80% of our client base prefers to speak Spanish or only speaks Spanish, that's the language we speak with the vast majority of our clients.
That's amazing. When you meet with a new client, what kind of language or cultural barriers tend to come up right away, and how would you overcome them?
The barriers that come up are that Spanish speakers, particularly when they encounter sort of people, for lack of a better term, professionals, and I'm not trying to suggest that any other profession is not professional, but when they encounter professionals like lawyers, maybe bookkeepers, people like that, they're a little suspicious because there's a bit of a class difference, obviously, and the world of law is something that most of the Spanish speakers in this office really don't understand. A lot of them perhaps have had experiences with lawyers in their own countries, but in this country, they're not going to seek out lawyers for a lot of things unless things get bad for them. So they're a little uncomfortable. They don't know how it's going to work. They don't know if they are going to be received and spoken to in their own language. They don't know if they're going to be respected. And so they will come into our office a little bit hesitant. We've been able to break down a lot of those barriers because we advertise on TV, and we've advertised on TV quite heavily. But we've also done things in the communities. We sponsored giveaways. We for 8 years in a row, we've given away 500 turkeys and all the fixings at Thanksgiving. We are well known in the community. I've given talks and speeches at bilingual schools. And so we have built up a trust. Most of the people that come to this office have heard about El Abogado Elías.
How does being fluent in both English and Spanish change the dynamic for those early conversations after a crash or an injury?
Sure. I think it breaks down immediately that concern, that worry. Very clearly they know that I'm not a native Spanish speaker. They can tell from my accent. They can tell from the fact that in many ways the Spanish that I use is sort of the university level Spanish. So it in some ways it's more formal. It may sound a little stilted to them. I don't use slang because I didn't learn slang. I learned Spanish from books and from professors. But just the fact that I took the time to learn their language and to staff my office with people that are from their culture, that are from their traditions, that are native-born Spanish speakers, they immediately, I think, man, I can't get in their heads obviously, but I think that they come in and they say, "Oh, he gets us. It'll be okay here."
I've heard that you often work with families where some members will speak English very comfortably and then others prefer Spanish. So how do you keep everybody informed and confident throughout a case?
I love it when families come in and half of them speak Spanish and the other half speak both English and Spanish. And a lot of times the family dynamic that you'll see with these families is that the older folks speak only Spanish and they bring their children, they bring a younger translator, they bring somebody that they trust to speak both English and Spanish. And when I immediately start talking to the whole family in Spanish, the conversation will be, I would say, probably 70 to 80% Spanish and 20% in English. Sometimes to the younger folks that come in, I will speak English with them, joke around with them a little bit in English. But as I said, the barriers really fall when you show that you can easily transition from English and Spanish and back again.
And that's your whole office. That's amazing. It's not
It is.
just in the room with you.
Yeah, it is.
What tends to be lost in translation when accident victims work with firms that rely on interpreters instead of bilingual attorneys?
I don't think necessarily the work itself suffers, but what I think that does happen is the relationship suffers and the trust suffers a bit. There is a barrier when two people simply cannot communicate and they rely upon an interpreter. I can joke around with clients in Spanish and they will immediately laugh. If I had to make a joke, turn to the interpreter, ask the interpreter to translate that joke to the client hears the joke, something truly gets lost in translation. And when that something gets lost in translation, I think the relationship suffers a bit. Now, as I say, I'm sure there are plenty of law firms that use interpreters and they do a perfectly fine job. But, we get a lot of repeat business because of how we treat clients, because clients know that they are respected here. They know that obviously we speak their language. And, I can't speak for other law firms, but so many of our clients are coming back to us because of that relationship and because there's not a barrier between me and the client.
Can you share an anonymous example of a case where clear bilingual communication made a real difference in the outcome?
I probably have a whole bunch of them. I will share a little vignette with you. All right. And this didn't actually happen to me. It happened I had two summer interns that were working here, and each one of them only spoke a tiny little bit of Spanish, right? But we had to get a hold of the client. And so the client was living in the far edge of the South Valley in a mobile home community. And I sent these two interns to literally go to the client's door. I believe we needed something to be signed, right? And so the clients are knocking on the door. They think that somebody is there, but nobody is coming to the door, right? And so it was at that point that the intern yelled out reasonably loudly, "Estoy aquí de oficina del Abogado Elías." And instantly the door opens. With a smiling client that was telling us, no sabía quién estaba en mi cuarto. I didn't know who was at my door, and so that is a very sort of instantaneous sort of example of how the ability of Spanish, the ability to speak Spanish, breaks down barriers.
Beyond language, what cultural understanding helps you connect with your clients and earn their trust?
I think the cultural understanding is understanding the situation of our Spanish-speaking clients. We have Cuban clients in this office. We have Venezuelan clients in this office. The majority of them are Mexican nationals. And as you might imagine, and for Venezuelan clients as well. But this is a tough time for Mexican nationals. This is a tough time for Spanish speakers whose statuses may be in flux, who perceive, I think quite rightly, that there are forces in this country that are kind of aligned against them. And they need to know that they can come here, that we don't play tricks on them, that we are sensitive to their concerns. If they don't want to travel here for some reason, we will go to them. If they say, I know that I have a case, I know that I've been injured, I know I want to get justice, but I don't want to be deported, I don't want to put myself on the radar. We need to understand that, and we need to figure out ways to accommodate them, to provide services to them, to make them feel comfortable so that we can get them the compensation and the justice that they deserve. And so that they don't, a case can last 6 months, a case can last 2-3 years. We don't want them to have to worry every night, gosh, if I pursue this case, are people going to pursue me? And because that is, that issue is so at the forefront of what's happening now in the Spanish-speaking community, culturally, we are very aware of it.
For listeners who speak English but have Spanish-speaking relatives or coworkers, what should they know about helping someone find the right lawyer after an accident?
The most important thing that they should know is, for God's sakes, find a lawyer, because the system in general is set up to abuse people that don't have lawyers. Insurance companies, insurance adjusters, when an accident happens, they have a whole unit that is designed to deal with people that are unrepresented. And that unit is designed to sort of hide the ball, to get people to very quickly agree to settlements, to get them to give statements that will damage their case later on. The most important thing is for English-speaking people that have Spanish-speaking friends, family members, to tell somebody, look, go get a lawyer. The other thing it's important for English speakers who have Spanish-speaking friends and relatives to tell them is that, hey, the lawyers are not on the side of ICE. They're not on the side of the police. They're not on the side of the federal administration. They are on your side. And all that we want to do is help our clients get justice, put some money in their pockets, get their bills paid, and move on with their lives. There's only so much, obviously, that I can control about what's happening in America today. But what I can control is what happens with a client's case and whether or not we put money in that client's pocket. And as sure as I'm sitting here right now talking to you, clients with lawyers get more money. It is that simple.
That's a great piece of advice that everyone, heed it.
God, I wish so many people would understand that. So many times I get people who come in and they tell me, "Oh, I thought I could do it on my own. I didn't get very far." And not all of the horses are out of the barn at that point, but some of them are. And so we got to work to corral those horses, get them back in, and put a bar on the door and get the case moving in the right direction.
What does this podcast name, what does Justice in Two Languages mean to you and to the community you serve?
I take very seriously my role as a member of this community, but also as, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that I'm a leader in this community. I'm not, out there staging rallies and protests and things like that, although I have. But what justice in two languages means is representing Spanish speakers to the absolute best of my ability, and to the best of the best of ability of my staff as well. We take that job very seriously, and it means making sure that no matter what language you speak, the legal system gives you a fair shake. The big insurance companies give you a fair shake. The big corporations give you a fair shake. I settled a case for a client a while back. It was a major accident, and the clients themselves, because of the manner in which the accident happened, they did not know that they had a case. And the insurance company was not reaching out to tell them, oh, you have a real case. I was able to get that case settled after somebody suggested that they come to me. And I think it was some, like it was a neighbor or something that said, hey, go to the corner of Bridge and Isleta in the South Valley and go talk to Abogado Elías. He'll tell you if you have a case or not. And justice in two languages means making sure that that person doesn't get run over by the big insurance companies, by the big corporations. It means changing their lives for the better.
Thank you so much. A lot of great advice in this episode. And that's it for today's first episode of Justice in Two Languages. Not too painful, right?
No, it was just fine. That's just you asked excellent questions. I appreciate your input, and I'm glad you and maybe somebody else out there is interested in my story.
Well, to learn more about David Elias Idinopulos, yeah?
You got it perfect.
Thank you. And his team at Elias Law, visit abogadoelias.com.
Abogadoelias.com. ABOGADOELIAS.com. Our phone number is 505-888-8888, or as we say in Spanish, muchos ochos.
Muchos ochos. Thanks so much for listening. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review if you like today's episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.